everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander, where we do our best to keep our games of Commander fun without sacrificing our ability to win. I'm BK, and today I have a game of Commander featuring Hinata, Dawncrowned, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, Isshin, Two Heavens is One, and Shorikai, Genesis Engine. So we are not a very competitive group. We're a bunch of average players looking to have fun playing our favorite game. If that sounds like the kind of magic that you enjoy watching, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And a quick shout out to our Patreon, link in the description. Thank you everybody for your continued support. So I kick off the game by playing a Temple of Enlightenment, scrying one to the bottom, and passing over to Kovacs. He drops a Forest as his land for turn, and Scalding Tarn hits the battlefield for Kyle. He pays 1 life and goes and fetches up a Savai Triome. On to J-Man's turn, he plays a Plains as his land and passes. On my turn, I play Spectator Seeding, which of course enters the battlefield untapped. I cast Fellwar Stone, and when that ETBs, it gets a non-zero amount of glare on it. Over to Kovacs' turn, he drops Sunpetal Grove, and then he casts his own ramp, Arcane Signet. And with that, he passes over to Kyle for his turn 2. He drops a Godless Shrine, entered tapped, so he does not pay the 2 life. J-Man plays another Plains, and casts his own Arcane Signet, before passing the turn over to BK.
Haha, Kyle, you're the only one that didn't get ramp on turn 2.
So I play a Storm-Carved Coast, which comes in untapped, and then I cast Talrand, Sky Summoner, who will hopefully produce me some 2/2 blue flying drakes. Over to Kovacs, he plays Darkboar Pathway as a land for turn, and then he casts his commander, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice. You know, a 4/4 with basically all the keyword text and proliferates. Kyle plays a Plains as a land for turn, followed by Welcoming Vampire, in an effort to draw some cards when he casts creatures with low power. He passes to J-Man, who plays Mech Hanger, which can help animate his vehicles. He follows that up with a Gold Mirror, getting him a little bit more ramp action. Then he passes over to BK, and I play a Glacial Fortress, tapped, as a land for turn, and I cast Feather the Redeemed, hoping to take advantage of Feather's triggered ability. Following that, I move into combat and hit J-Man for 2 with Talrand, dropping him to 38. On to Kovacs' turn, he plays a Plains as his land, and he follows that up by casting a Johnny, Mentor of Heroes, that can spit out some 1/1 counters, increase his card selection off the top of his library, or gain him a whole bunch of life. In this case, he puts +1/+1 counters on Atraxa, and then he moves to combat, swinging at BK. But before damage resolves, I cast Swords to Plowshares, triggering Talrand, making me a Drake. This will exile Atraxa and gain Kovacs a bunch of life. With nothing left to do, he passes to Kyle, who plays Haunted Ridge as his land for turn, and then he casts everybody's favorite blast from the past, Martin Stromgald.
What a distinguished gentleman. Yeah, I know.
He drew a card off of Welcoming Vampire and passed the turn, and J-Man plays his commander, Shorikai, Genesis Engine, which is not only a big, threatening vehicle, but can draw him cards. Talisman of Progress hits the battlefield on my side of the board, and I move to combat at Kovacs, taking out a Johnny. Kovacs' salt meter increased as I cast my commander, Hinata, Dawncrowned, and with that I pass the turn to Kovacs, who plays Blighted Woodland as his land, and he immediately sacrifices it to go find a swamp and an island. And he passes the turn over to Kyle, who plays a swamp as his land, and then he casts Enlightened Tutor, and he goes searching his deck for an artifact or enchantment. In this case, it is Fervent Charge. It has one of those sweet combat triggers that Isshin loves to have in the deck. He follows that up by casting Dockside Extortionist, and this triggers Welcoming Vampire and gains him 6 treasures. And using some of those treasures, he casts his commander, Isshin, Two Heavens is One. And after that, he casts the Fervent Charge that he just drew off the top of his library thanks to the Enlightened Tutor from a moment ago. On to combat. His 2 attackers are super pumped up and drop me down to 27. At the end of Kyle's turn, J-Man activates Shorikai, gets a pilot, draws 2 cards, and discards a card. And then he casts Foundry Inspector on his turn, which reduces the cost of his artifacts. Then he gets a cool free 2 mana off of a 0-cost Soul Ring, which is pretty good. Following that, he casts his favorite, Unwinding Clock, which will untap all of his artifacts during each other player's untap step. Silver Mirror enters the battlefield, giving him some more ramp in the form of a Dork. Onto my turn, I untap, which allows J-Man to untap his stuff. I play a tapped Port Town because I have no island or plains in my hand. I move right into combat at Kyle. He declares no blocks and drops to 30 with 4 commander damage. I pass the turn, and on my end step, J-Man does Shorikai shenanigans. Of note, he discards Wonder into his graveyard, allowing all of his creatures to have flying. Kovacs draws for turn and plays Temple of the False God. He's in no way flooded at all at this point. Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, hits the battlefield again. And then he casts Together Forever, which will support 2, giving Atraxa 2 +1/+1 counters. And when he moves into end step, Proliferate triggers on Atraxa, giving another counter. J-Man again does Shorikai shenanigans, thanks to that unwinding clock untapping his stuff every upkeep. On to Kyle's turn, he plays another Plains as his land, and then he casts Adriana, Captain of the Guard, who will enable some melee and give other creatures melee. Kyle attempts to move into combat, and I'm like, nah. So I cast Reality Spasm, targeting all of the untapped permanents on the battlefield, except for my stuff, but including my Talrand. And I chose Talrand because I didn't know that I could target a tapped creature at this point. In response to my spell, J-Man casts Swords to Plowshares on Hinata. He had 1 floating colorless, so he activates Shorikai while he's maintaining priority. Mystic Confluence hits the stack with 3 targets, which will be Swords to Plowshares and 2 creatures to bounce, including one of my own.
Bounce my Dockside.
Yeah, I was thinking about it.
I don't think we'll ever bounce your Dockside, Kyle. Instead, I choose Adriana as well as my own Drake, therefore enabling Feather's ability at the end step. So everybody taps all their stuff, and this prevents Kyle from being able to attack me this turn. So I move into end step and get Mystic Confluence and Reality Spasm back to hand thanks to Feather. Hallowed Fountain enters the battlefield on J-Man's side of the board. He takes 2 life, and then he casts Imposter Mech, which becomes Dockside Extortionist from Kyle's side of the battlefield. J-Man gets 6 treasures, and then he casts Aerial Surveyor, hoping to beat down his opponents while getting more lands on the battlefield. Solemn Simulacrum, aka Sad Robot, hits the battlefield, finding him a basic island, entering the battlefield tapped. He then crews his commander and moves to combat with his flying Shorikai at BK, and he forgets I have a 2/2 Drake. Probably because it's not a real token, am I right? So anyway, I chump block, but then he casts Organic Extinction in his post-combat main phase. I have a response, so I cast Paradoxical Outcome. This triggers Talrand as well as Feather, and I bounce all of my non-token creatures back to my hand, including my Fell War Stone, so I can draw 4 cards, and J-Man's spell resolves. He moves to end step, I get Paradoxical Outcome back to hand, and then on to my turn, I drop a command tower as my land for turn, and seeing as she's in my hand, I get to cast my commander, Hinata Dawn Crowned, without commander tax. I recast Fell War Stone, and using what little mana I have remaining, I cast Boros Signet, hoping to be able to take more actions on my next turn. J-Man casts Shimmermere at his end step, given that it has Flash. He has 1 colorless mana floating and uses that to activate Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and getting a pilot. Over to Kovacs' turn. Gavany Township is his land for turn, which is great because it can make counters on his creatures. He recasts his commander, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, and moves over to Kyle's turn. Shorikai shenanigans happening all the while. Blood Crypt enters Kyle's battlefield. He casts Adriana, Captain of the Guard again. And again, on his end step, J-Man does Shorikai stuff. He also flashes in a mobile garrison thanks to Shimmermere. And onto J-Man's turn, he draws and plays Thoughtcast for 1 blue mana, given all of his artifacts he has. So he draws 2 more cards, plays a Plains as a land for turn, casts Drum Bellower, ensuring that not only all of his artifacts, but now all of his creatures untap each untapped step as well. He crews his vehicles, and he tries to slap away my life total. On combat, Mobile Garrison triggers untapping one of his dorks. I block his Aerial Surveyor with Hinata, which he did not get to find a land because we have the same amount of lands. Onto my turn, I cast Dika, Fractal Theorist, hoping to make some tokens in the near future. I move to combat, attacking the only opponent that I could really target at this point, dropping Kyle down to 26. Onto Kovacs' turn, he is absolutely thrilled to be able to play a forest as a land for turn. The flood is real, buddy. I'm so sorry. So he paid 1 additional mana to cast Journey to Eternity on his commander. Then he activates Gavany Township, getting a +1 counter on Atraxa. He deals 5 more damage to BK. On his end step, Proliferate happens, getting another +1 counter, as well as Shorikai shenanigans, drawing 2 cards, discarding, and getting a pilot. On to Kyle's turn. He moves right into combat at BK. My only blocker is Dika, and I really don't want to lose it, so I take all the damage and go to 3. He then casts Diabolical Intent, sacrificing Adriana, and goes to his library, tutoring up a Sun Titan, which he will then immediately cast. I heavily consider countering this, but want to hold up my counterspell for my own protection at this point. So in response, J-Man does Shorikai shenanigans, and Dockside Extortionist is the reanimation target, netting Kyle a disgusting 23 treasure tokens. He recasts his commander, Isshin, to Heavens as 1, using some of those treasures, and basically he says, "Come at me, bro," as he passes the turn over to J-Man. He drops a command tower of his own as a land for turn, and then casts Propaganda, making it a little harder for us to kill him with creatures. Before he moves to combat and kills me, I cast a Reality Spasm with 55 targets. An X spell on the stack does have a mana value equal to its X value, so this will make me a 55/55 fractal creature token, and with that I tap down my opponent's boards and move to my turn.
Here's the deal.
What's up?
If I kill Jeremiah,
Yeah.
will you two leave me alone for 1 turn cycle?
Yeah.
Assuming I could kill him. I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
No.
Well, the negotiations were short. Dika activates despite Kovacs wanting me dead.
A2 for your propaganda.
I move to combat with my unblockable 55/55, knocking J-Man out of the game. I pass the turn, and a delighted Kovacs plays a Plains as his land for turn, followed by Hardened Scales, increasing the amount of +1/+1 counters he can throw around. He activates Gavany Township, and gets even more counters on Atraxa. He attacks me, but before I would die, I cast Mystic Confluence. This time I'm paying to bounce 2 things and drawing a card. I bounce Isshin, Atraxa, and I get a 5/5 Fractal out of the deal as well, thanks to Dika. So I draw my card off of Mystic Confluence, and then Kovacs recasts his commander, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, before passing the turn over to Kyle. He draws for turn, plays a Bajuka Bog, exiling all of my stuff from my graveyard. He recasts his commander from his hand, Isshin, to Heavens as 1, and following that he casts Aurelia, the War Leader, enabling additional combat steps, but I'm not worried because we have a deal, right Kyle?
I'm gonna attack you, Brandon, with all these.
Alright, get the knife. There's a knife on the board.
For real.
So we
The
got
betrayal
2
has now been complete.
We got 2 Sunshine triggers, but I will order them in the way that Welcoming Vampire will come in, and then Martin will come in. So the Welcoming Vampire triggers and I draw.
Yeah, quite frankly, at this point, I think Kyle's just like putting stuff onto the battlefield and saying things are happening. I'm not exactly sure. We never really know with this guy. So he attacked me. I had to chump with everything, and then he attacks me again.
Sun Titan triggers. I get a Scalding turn.
So he knocks me out of the game, deals a bunch of damage to Kovacs, and goes to his 3rd combat step.
We go into the 3rd combat.
And remember, for each combat, Fervent Charge is triggering twice, and he's recurring things out of his graveyard thanks to Sun Titan.
I'll block your 18. You got
Gotcha.
15. I gain 4.
Yep.
Kovacs blocks and drops to 7, while Kyle makes sure he's playing as optimal as possible by using his Scalding Tarn, having it in the graveyard for his Sun Titan triggers. And sadly, on Kovacs' turn, the Flood got him, so he has to say go, and Kyle moves right into combat, chipping away his remaining life total. Congratulations, Kyle. Well done piloting Isshin to another victory. We hope you enjoyed the game. Please let us know what you think about it in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and like the content that you've been enjoying. And as always, thanks for watching.
Kyle said that he wouldn't attack you for a turn.
He did say that.
No, I did say I wouldn't attack you.
I mean, if he wants to have
Honor.
No.